Welcome back. You're watching the Power Breakfast Show. Now, as you know, we've been talking about it. The State of the Nation address is expected to be given by the President this afternoon from 3 p.m. And that's the basis of our conversation this morning here on the Power Breakfast Show. We have a very engaging panel led by Mutegi Njau. We're also joined by Wanjiru Wekonyo. She's the National Coordinator of the Institute for Social Accountability. Professor Peter Kawanja, he's the CEO of Africa Policy Institute. Honorable Mansa Nyamwea is a Member of Parliament of South Mugirango constituency, and of course Barack Muluka, who is a political analyst. We want to engage you this morning, so 22422 is the SMS line, or you can get us on Twitter. The hashtag is Power Breakfast. We'd love to hear from you to start communicating. For now, I hand you over to Mutegi. Mutegi?
Thank you, Karibu. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is a very one subject and very topical. We had it yesterday in church and it was very animated. We're doing the same this morning. And the beginning will be to ask you, Wanjiru, what do you expect the President to say today? What is your expectation of the presentation, of the address from the President?
I think looking at the past two State of the Nations, I can comfortably say it will be mainly a PR exercise. And I'll say why it's a PR exercise, because the State of the Nation is supposed to speak to how the government has implemented Article 10 on national values. National values on inclusivity, accountability, rule of law, all those principles that really embody the spirit of the Constitution. Now, the Jubilee administration has had challenges playing within these national values, so that the report has already been written by the actions of the President and his administration in the past 12 months. So every time a court ruling is undermined by a cabinet secretary, a ruling on roads, that roads should be devolved to county governments, and then the funds should go with that, and the cabinet secretary ignores that. When the President is told by the court you cannot hire 10,000 police recruits through an irregular process, and he goes ahead to do so. So that report has already been written. So the administration, the President will be forced to speak about the positive things they have done, maybe in implementing the manifesto, but I don't believe he'll be able to speak honestly to the country about implementing Article 10 on national values.
Let's hear from the Professor. What do you expect the President to say?
I think the President does not want to go to speak today. Let's be clear about that. He is required by the Constitution to do that. So he's going to do that pursuant of his responsibility bestowed on him by the Constitution. That's one. Two, but next year is election year. So you're going to hear out of these, political spinning, as you hear from Wanjiru about what one is not going to say, what one is not going to say. The reality is different. How is it different? Last year, but one, we were talking about security. Today, we are not going to talk about security. Why? Because the government has solved the issue of security. Last year, the main issue that was burning was corruption. At that time, nothing was done. At least, something is being done about corruption. Kenya is a nation state, but it is still work in progress. My son, my grandsons, my great-granddaughter, all will be involved in building this nation. We did not expect the Jubilee to complete this project, they sit aside and say, here are the keys, open the house and start living in it. So there is a lot of expectation, and this revolution of expectation, particularly in the opposition side of things, is beginning to become very unrealistic. And in view of 2017, I think it is raising temperatures for nothing.
Let's hear from the Member of Parliament.
Thank you.
What do you expect the President to do?
Of course, my expectation, number one, is a constitutional requirement. If actually it is not a constitutional requirement, it may have decided not to come.
Yeah.
That's number one. Number two is that as a country, the President was given, during the time of campaign, very specific things he told the country is going to do. Number three,
his manifesto.
But what's more important?
The party manifesto.
Yes, what's more important is how he has used national resources to reduce poverty in this country. And it is two entries. There is resources we have given him through the budget. There's national debt, which the country has incurred. Before he took leadership, the country national debt was 1.7 trillion. Now the national debt is more than 3 trillion. Imagine, I want you to imagine this. For over 50 years, the national debt of this country was 1.7. In less than 3 years, the Jubilee government has created a national debt for the country of more than 1.5
So do you expect the president to address that?
Just a minute. Those are the resources we have given him, right? Plus the budget which has been getting. He needs to tell us, you have given me these resources. This is how I have used it. Alright? How have I used the resources you have given me, you have bestowed on me? And then you will see what will come out of it. The wastage, the amount of wastage, that's why people talk about corruption. The wastage, the huge wastage that we are experiencing as a nation. Then has the resources been properly utilized to fight poverty? Because the bottom line, whatever you want to speak, whatever you want to address in this country, it goes to one point, to reduce whether you want to improve health, you are reducing poverty. What you want to improve education, you are reducing poverty. What you are doing the roads, you are reducing poverty. What you are giving power, electricity, you are reducing poverty. To improve the welfare of the nation, the Kenyan people.
Let us hear from the analyst now that we have made a point.
Thank you. I think that within the same kind of prism as Professor Peter Kwanja has set the tempo, that this is going to be an exercise in apologia, that the government will be talking about the promissory note that was made 3 years ago about national cohesion and integration, about the economy, about open government, and in all this we are going to see apologetics. Something to the extent that now for the first time we are hearing a lot about corruption, that in the past nothing was happening, and the reason we are now hearing a lot about it is because this government is doing something about it, even when all they are doing is window dressing. That last time the president enjoyed a standing ovation, and he missed a very critical moment when people stood up to applaud him, including some of his fiercest critics on the floor of Parliament. He should have recognized that as a very telling moment, that he was being given an opportunity to take and provide leadership, because you can occupy a position of leadership without providing leadership and without leading, and I think that that is the tragedy that we have got in this country.
Looks like you want to say something.
Yes.
To say something.
Yes, I am, because I'm just going back to the statement that Kangwanja made about my spin. There's no spin in saying that the Constitution requires the report to speak to national values. That is not spin, it's a fact. The national values are then clearly articulated, and let's be very specific. Let's look at elections. Elections are coming up, as Kangwanja says, as we all know. The IEBC is presently dogged with very low credibility. It's disputed in terms of the composition, in terms of the way it's using the equipment it has in terms of the elections. There are also issues about its mandate, because there is if you read the Constitution, looking at the law, they are supposed to vet candidates who get nominated, to make sure that we then don't have criminals, people engaged in drugs, people with, dubious backgrounds, getting into government. Because once they do, you can't fight corruption. You can't fight the kind of crimes that are then perpetrated through the state.
But that was catered for by Chapter 6. And which was watered by Parliament.
Very good point. So that was watered down. So what do we want to see? If the president doesn't want to spin, because this administration is excellent at spin, they are masters of spin, unfortunately at a very high cost to us, we will then want to see what is the concrete plan to deal with the credibility issues around the IEBC. What is the concrete plan to deal with the transition in the judiciary that is coming up, and it's coinciding with the elections? There's also a transition in the IEBC commissioners itself. So what is the concrete plan that will get acceptance across the board? Because we cannot dispute objectives about the credibility of an institution, and then the ruling party calls it spin or criticism or complaints, when other parties other than the state party refute the credibility and objectivity of an institution. So if this State of the Nation does not address that, then not only will the president have failed to address a key issue that could drive conflict, it will just simply reinforce that this is really a window dressing exercise that is really counter to what the Constitution expected.
I'm sure the professor is dying to speak.
No, I have no issues with speaking, because I have a problem with this government also, that it is not doing enough PR. When you complain that this government is doing, I have a problem with it, that it's not doing enough PR.
Yeah.
Its communication capacity is still very weak. Because how can Wanjiru speak like that when the government is aware that it has implemented 70% of the promises it made? That it has dealt with issues of security, that it has so many people that it has put to court so that the court can decide on their fate regarding corruption.
The question is about corruption, is about conviction.
So because the government does not convict, court convict. No, we are talking about systems. Now listen to this.
Yes.
Listen to this. We are crying on mountain tops about democracy. Democracy is nothing but institutions that implement it. Then you stand on the same mountains and talk about IEBC is not working without saying how it should work, without complaining and whining all around. You just tell IEBC, do X, Y, Z. If it doesn't do it, take it to court. The Constitution is very clear. Any individual member of that commission who carries individual culpability or responsibility for whatever, go to court.
Are you aware of something called as chicken gate? Something called chicken gate.
Chicken gate came from, I mean, it's a name we have used locally, but essentially what we are talking about.
What has been done about those people in the IEBC who eat chicken by this government?
Who confirmed that they have eaten? You see, let's distinguish between witch hunting.
Is that witch hunting?
Take them to court. No, but that's what we are saying.
Who is supposed to take them to court?
Systems are, we have investigative mechanisms, don't we? Because governing is not about mob justice. That's not what it's all about. You respect the rule, the order. That's why we say law and order. When you use those two words, law and order, we are emphasizing the rule of procedure in democratic governance. Democratic governance is about the government is not doing anything about corruption. You put pressure on it. Yes, it does something about corruption. Get the people, put it to the prosecution. Then the court does its part. The court can prosecute somebody and jail them. Then the prisons let them out. That has happened in many countries. So let's have procedures. That's what we're talking about.
If you imply that corruption can only be fought through the court system, first of all, you're misleading Kenyans, because the world over that is not the case. If you want to fight corruption, it starts with the point I raised, which you have ignored. What is the position of the ruling party, of the administration, on the quality of officers, the caliber of officers getting into the executive and getting into elected office? What is the position that they are pushing, that the president will whip members of parliament around to ensure that we no longer have people who are culpable, who are compromised, getting into office, either the parastatals, because we have seen appointment to parastatals and we know the mess that is there. In elected office, we have seen the mess, or even in the commissions. So let's not deal with generalities and your very strong, eloquent ability to sidestep issues. My point was very clear. Can you tell us what the position is of the ruling administration in terms of cleaning up to make sure that the elections will be credible?
I need your protection, because I'm not a government. I'm not in the government. So I need that protection.
So you can't answer specific questions.
Can you say that? I'm not here to answer questions on behalf of the government.
You know, government exists in many guises, and we must recognize each one of those guises whenever we see it and as we know it. When we talk about corruption, I think Professor Kwanja is doing a very good job here. He's actually able to sidestep issues and mislead. Look, this corruption has touched and hit right at the heart of government. That when we have had things about
some people think
corruption
in the heart of the president,
they've gone right into the presidency.
Yeah.
that there is corruption admitted by head of state himself, that's within State House, within the office of the president. But you know, we cannot just operate on the basis of words. We must go beyond words. That when you are saying as president that this thing is within State House, what are you doing about it? When you say it's within Harambee Avenue, what are you doing about it? When we hear about Langata Road Primary School and it's hitting right at the presidency, what are you doing about it? And we have seen that when some of these people have been mentioned in the past, that none other than the head of state himself has come out and defended them. And we have been told that those who are speaking against these things are detractors who want to bring down the government. In the fullness of time, we see the self-same people now being pushed into the corner, and the self-same mouths that were saying that these people are innocent, that they are being unfairly accused, coming out and saying this woman here is a thief. This is a thief who should be in committee maximum security prison. That the person who is saying that is a person who has told members of parliament that each time you see my mouth speaking, you should know that it's the government that is speaking. And here I'm talking about none other than the leader of the majority in the National Assembly. That there's a lot of lip service, and I do not place any premium to these words that vaporize the moment they leave the lips.
Thank you very much. You know, the whole issue of corruption, it needs political goodwill. The political goodwill will only come from one source. That's the presidency. And the point here is, the issue people have been talking about evidence. Corruption is perpetuated by phone calls, by intimidation. It's not done in another way. The CS will call the PS will call the pastoral chief, and it moves from one place to another. So when people come and say, I've not written you, I've not instructed you, but the person makes a phone call, it can come from any source. It can even come from the top, and the person, the CS or the PS, implements what he has been told. What he is told to do is illegal. So the big issue here is that first and foremost, the first thing which you must stop is phone calls. The man who can stop those phone calls not to work is only one, who was bestowed by all Kenyans to be the president of the Republic of Kenya. He's the only man who can wake up and say, from today henceforth, my CS, my PS, my C of anybody I find doing this from State House or from Harambee House, you'll face the consequences. And if that's done, there will be change in this country. The president has himself spoken, and even he has said it when he's not in the country, when he's in Israel. He said, look at this weather here. It's very hostile. But come home. I'm faced with a lot of challenges. I'm faced with nepotism. I'm faced with corruption. Surely, who should address the issue of corruption? It is him. Because, you know, we talk about courts, we talk about IBC, we talk about anti-corruption. There must be enabling environment. The enabling environment must come from one source, the chief executive of the country. What do I mean by enabling? You know, in this country, there's a place, if you go to North Eastern, you find the weather is very hostile. For somebody to grow food there must be irrigation. If somebody comes from Kisii, he will wait rain to come and he will plant. He will be able to do what? To have harvest. So we are not on the same environment. So the issue here is executive creating a hostile environment towards the fight of corruption. My view here is the government is creating a hostile environment towards fighting corruption. There is no political goodwill to fight it.
Let's end the subject of corruption by giving you an opportunity to say something, and then we move from that subject.
Well, corruption is going to be with us in terms of as an issue, because it is a pillar for 2017 campaign for both opposition CORD and Jubilee. Therefore, it's going to be an issue, and you're going to get this tug of war you know, you have not done anything about corruption. At that time, you are ignoring all the numbers of people who have been brought to book. So that is, Mutegi, you cannot do away with that, even in the next issue. But that said, let's move on to say that Jubilee give promises. I think the right way to judge is to say, of those promises that they give, there were 225 tangible promises. No, we're not talking about witch hunting. 225. If you go by their manifesto. And out of those, they have admitted they have only implemented 70%. To be more precise, it is 68.8% of what they promised. In other words, we said we are going to build so many level 5 hospitals. Now, by the third year of your rule, how many of those have you implemented? And then we find no, we're not talking about devolved or not devolved. All the money comes from the central government. I mean, Kenya is a unitary state. We are not a federal state. What is your problem? I mean, let's go to political science 101. No. We are a unitary state. We are not a confederacy. We are not.
So anyway, 60% has been achieved.
Yes, they have achieved their promises through whichever means, collaborating with the governors, working with the
that are today dominating. And when you come and tell people things like we are going to rule you for 100 years, basically people are hearing you to be telling them that we are going to dominate and oppress you for 200 years, for 100 years, because they do not engage in an exercise that tries to bring people together. Yes, give them that when you look at 2007, 2008, the communities that were most adversely affected in the conflicts and the violence that we saw at that time have come together, which is a good thing. We give them credit. But they have come together at the expense of the rest of the country. They are leaving out everybody else. If you and I unite, our unity is as good as the purpose for which we unite. If you and I unite so that we oppress the others here, or we are seen or perceived to be oppressing the others, then our unity is a conspiracy. And to get away from this, because we are moving into very dangerous space where this issue has got to be addressed one way or the other, we either begin a conversation about it and say this is how we remedy it, or if we cannot remedy it that way, we give people the opportunity for self-determination under a different arrangement.
Mutava Musyimi wrote an article in Sunday Nation completely disagreeing with that.
Mutava Musyimi is part of the problem. He was part of the solution when he was Reverend Mutava Musyimi going to Fungamano House. He got inside the house of the Pharaoh and he now weeps louder than the bereaved.
Let us hear from the professor, because I would like you to address the question whether you think the president, since he was elected in 2013, he has made serious efforts to be inclusive, so that he is not seen the way you are hearing. Two tribes.
Let me first of all say this as an intellectual.
Address the Wananchi.
Yes.
And
that's okay, as an intellectual, and from where I see it, because that's why you invited me. The concept of unity is itself very problematic. Let's start from there. Problematic in the sense that the best unity you find is among robbers alleging to rob a bank. The concept of unity.
It's called a conspiracy.
Yeah. That's unity. So unity, as used in the country, sometimes is lacking. I think we need to go to the fundamental values, as Wajiro keep on reminding us. Question of justice, equality, and those values that are deliverable are the key things that we need. Unity can be an ideology, and as I said, the best you find is among thieves organizing to rob a bank. But what you are asking is whether we are talking about the national unity, the concept of nation. And I think the concept of nation in America, in Britain, they have been voting whether Scotland should go alone or not. The question of the nation state is a contested concept across the world. Let's get that. Therefore, even in Kenya, it is still work in progress, and we have to be determined to build it. Now, has the government done anything about that? Before 2013, and I'm saying this as a scholar who took part in that fight as part of the Kibaki administration, experts. The first decision that the president made, contrary to everybody else, was that we must ensure that the people of the Rift Valley and the people of Kenya are united so that the country does not fight again. That decision he made. And it was very unpopular, I must tell you that. It was extremely unpopular, particularly in view of 2007. It was very unpopular. He crusaded it for it. He convinced the administration and everybody else that we don't have to be enemies. We can work. That is what gave birth to what you find today, Jubilee. What other unity would you be fighting for? Then the next thing is, let's go on.
Let's go on.
Forget about the rest. That's the country. That's the country called Kenya.
No.
The country called Kenya.
I'm not done.
Go on.
The first problem was to get Kenya from where it was in 2007, 2008. Where it was the brink of collapse because of war, almost a near civil war. So getting it from there and demolishing the architecture that had brought this was very, very important. That was done. After the election, but let's be statistical about this. The Kalenjin constituted 12% of the national population. The Kikuyu in total, counted to a person, constitute 22% of the population. That gives you 34% of the population. That is not equivalent to 50.7% of the vote they got. So the idea that this is a Kalenjin government is a mirage. It's a lie. because 4% cannot be equivalent to 50%. So in the first place, there is a propaganda base there. There are Kenyans from Northeastern, from Coast Province, from other parts who voted with the Jubilee. That's the part we don't want to agree, because 50 cannot come from two communities. That's a fact. So the moment you continue saying two communities,
I think he's stepping.
No, I'm not saying
you're not addressing the issue.
That's the point.
No, please, you're not bring the issue as it is.
I think the intellectualism has missed the point.
Give me my chance to finish.
But
let me finish. Until you demolish farces and myths that are not based on anything but quicksand, then you cannot have a legitimate, logical, rational argument. The rational argument is that there is will on the part of Jubilee government to bring the unity of the country.
There is will.
Which is basically why the president camped at Coast Province. And the result was the results were clear. In the Maridi by-election, the president's vote moved from what it was about 2000, about 20% to almost 50%.
No, there's nothing like that. I think this gentleman is misleading.
No. Let's hear the member talking.
Thank you. You know, the issue of national unity can only be brought by the head of state. Those people who have been given the responsibility to govern this country. By their actions, how do they govern? And let's be very basic here. How do they govern? We go to appointments in government. How is the appointment done in government? From all the regions must be all inclusive. Who is appointed from where? Who is from which place? Because those actions is what will make the country come together or separate. Allocation of resources. That's the key thing here. Because when you look...
There are people who think that the president has appointed people from all over Kenya.
The statistics there to show. This is not something we can hide. The statistics there to show it is open. If there is an appointment today of a parastatal body, right, you'll find 80% of those appointments are from two communities, or 90%. It's a fact statement. And when you do 80%, he has rightly said that the national population of the two communities, the Karaji and the Kikuyus, is 34. That's 80% of the appointment give a reflection of that 4%. Because the cohesion of this country can only be implemented. And I can tell you another example. The deputy president goes place like in Kisi. He starts telling us, look guys, you made a mistake to vote. All right? He's telling us we are not going to give you money for development. And we know very well that allocation of funds is done by the National Assembly. But when you go to Kisi, true, we don't have roads. And the professor said here that Jubilee has profile 6-8% of their money. It's true probably in other areas. But where I come from and other areas, we don't see those facilities, the infrastructure, be it healthcare, we don't see it.
Let's talk about national unity.
National unity. Yes. So national unity can only be bought if allocation of resources is seen. It must be seen by everybody that this decision is fair. This decision, yes, that community is represented. That community is represented. It is from coast, if from
what is called the face of Kenya.
What you call rightly the face of Kenya. And where we are now, increasingly, every day, all appointments which are being made, even the latest appointment which were done, where Franklin Bett was appointed, where Kosgei was given a job, and others, right? Was from one region.
Okay, let him say something. Let
me finish. Will those appointments make Kenyans, other Kenyans, think we have one nation?
Okay, let him answer.
I think, again, let me clear my role as an intellectual. There's an election coming next year. There was an election in 2013. What are elections about? Election is about winning so that you govern. And governing is with those that you feel are going to help you to govern. Now the problem of the opposition here is that you lose an election and still want to talk about the stalwarts and the veterans being in the government. So we have not gotten of this hang-up about power sharing.
I think we need to put in our
power sharing. It's true. We have not gotten over this hang-up about power sharing, because losing an election means literally losing the opportunity to govern.
I think we must correct
Are we having two countries?
I think
what you're saying, what is advocating here, that if you lose, form your own country, and if you win, form your own government. That's what he's saying. He's saying, if you lose, you get 0.
No.
If you win, you take it all.
I didn't say that.
If that's the thinking.
I didn't say that.
If what is saying,
I didn't say that.
Gentlemen, just give me a minute. What he's saying is this: if you lose,
he says he didn't.
Can you allow me to speak for myself?
Can you allow me to interject, since you've had a lot?
Allow me to speak for myself.
And the point is, when we're talking about unity, the question we're asking is, has the president done enough to unify the country?
Exactly, that's the question I asked.
The country has historical fractions that and is predisposed to electoral violence, especially around elections and resource sharing. So when we are measuring this from the State of the Nation address, what will we expect to hear the president saying? What is it that brings the nation together? And I agree with Mheshimiwa there. It's about the style of governance. Unfortunately, the president, the DP, was schooled in the Moi era. They understand only coercive governance. Yet, the constitutional dispensation is one of cooperative governance. Correct. So that they are supposed to, even though they are the holders of power, the winner-takes-all mentality was supposed to be done with. In fact, the idea behind the 50+1 was partly to try and deal with that. The constitution possibly did not go far enough. So one of the ways that they have, this administration has further marginalized parts of this country is a lot of jingoism, too much ethnicism, Mount Kenya coming and being perceived as really the tenderpreneurs who are benefiting together with you know, those allied to people in government. So there's this perception that state resources are still not equitably accessible because the big national government contracts are going to people who are linked to the power. The other aspect that was supposed to bring unity was devolved government. How has the administration dealt with this? They have dealt with devolution coercively. They make decisions at the top, like the health procurement process.
Devolution we talk later.
But you see,
but it's part of it.
This is part of what is dividing the country, because the refusal to share resources then creates a perception that you have to be in power to benefit.
Exactly.
So if we are not in power, then like David D says, we are not going to be subject to your tyranny of numbers.
Exactly.
Who says we have to sit here and wait for tyranny? So the problem with the administration is that they need to fire their advisors, bring on people like David D, who can tell them a country called Kenya cannot be ruled through coercive power and winner takes all. You actually need to give a proper place to negotiate, and the president has not been weakened. There's this perception, and it's been perpetrated by the advisors of president who tell him he's been weakened by the constitution. Unless he can appoint the IG, unless he can appoint the CJ, unless he can control the institutions of state, he's powerless. They have missed the point that the constitution is a consultative governance. The president is supposed to lead by ideological persuasion, to convince the opposition, to convince the devolved governments that this is the way we must drive our security, and to make a compelling argument that forces them to come round to it. And ultimately he is the head of state and he has that executive authority. But the coercive approach really has been so detrimental, and then the failure to get out to distinguish between elections and governing is the other problem, and we can hear it with the professor. Because you need to know you have won the election and you need to first run the country for everybody. But Jubilee, through the use of funds, through the use of its appointments, continues to do elections, because everything they are doing is geared towards 2017. This is just fueling dissent and making parts of the country that are not in government really feel, come elections, we don't trust the IEBC, we don't feel we are included in this country and in governance matters, so that either the elections will be again contested and there will be conflict around it, or this sense of we better leave this table because tyranny of numbers is not the way we want to be governed.
But democracy is about tyranny of numbers. That is what democracy is all about. So let's not take it down. No, it is not about. It's a competition where you go and get the majority so that you are declared the winner. So you have demonized the concept of the tyranny of numbers to justify failure to mobilize Kenyans.
Professor is not right here. You know, the notions of tyranny and democracy are mutually exclusive. They never go together. I'm also an intellectual professor, and we intellectuals listen to one another. That's why I've been keeping quiet while you spoke. The notion of tyranny, of numbers, is very different from what you would want to call a majoritarian outcome of an election. And there are certain ways in which those who are majoritarian in terms of what you may want to call breed, rather than ideological kind of demarcations, can dominate others forever. That you can say, because we are very many and the only thing that brings us is that we are of a certain breed, we have got the numbers. And we hear about that even in Parliament, where Mheshimiwa here sits. People saying we have got the numbers, we have got the tyranny of numbers in Parliament. Tyranny and decision making in Parliament can never go together. When these people are taking the oath of office, they say, and I will serve conscientiously. That means that I'm going to be governed by my conscience and not by any tyrannical considerations. Fine, you have won the election, and therefore the instruments of state have been bequeathed to you. You're given the instruments of state, you are going to govern. And as you govern, you must remember that one of your foremost duties is to bring everybody together. And within the public service, there's depoliticization. You cannot look at public servants and say, because the Luhya of Kakamega did not vote for me, we systematically weed them out of government and look for Kikuyu who voted for us, look for Kalenjin who voted for us, and other subsidiaries who may have voted for us. And when we go to Kakamega or we go to Kisii, our task there is to tell them that you Kisii people made a mistake. I cannot make a mistake by exercising my democratic conscience and freedom and saying I'm going to vote for Wanjiru. And there are people within Kisii who voted for Jubilee, never mind that they may not have got and there are people in Luoland who voted for Jubilee. I agree with you that they were voted for by people from other parts of the country, and that's what we want to encourage. And therefore, when you get into government, remember that you are dealing with a depoliticized entity, and if it is politicized, it's your responsibility to depoliticize it and have the face of Kenya in that country. And I agree completely with Wanjiru, without jingoism, without arrogance. You cannot go to Malindi and tell the people of Malindi that we know you people of Malindi did not vote for us, but now we are asking you to vote for us so that we can also bring development here. Those are the things that create this perception that this government is not trying to do much about national cohesion and integration, and it's not about the kind of spinning that intellectuals like my friend here are doing, because we are dealing with a very acerbic reality that we are gravitating towards an election. That as we gravitate towards this election, in reality we are polarized along ethnic lines, including both those who are willing to be part of that polarity and those who are not willing to be part of that polarity. They are being forced to be part of it. We are dealing with an election commission that behaves as if it is a poodle in the lap of Jubilee, that when they talk to the opposition, you can see the chairman of the commission gloating. You can see his face shining with the blessedness and happiness, and telling these guys, you have lost. You know, I have never seen in my entire life a referee who celebrates because one side has scored and one side has been defeated. You must maintain positive neutrality. If this does not happen conclusively, Senior, they are driving this country towards a precipice.
Yes, you've made that point. I wanted to ask you, there are proposals maybe before we have next elections. Do you expect the president maybe to accede to the fact that we need an IPPG kind of a setup so that everybody is happy?
That is what we have always resisted, because we have committed ourselves to a democratic order where we have a government elected and a position to keep it under check. That is what we have chosen. And that the whole idea of inclusivity, as Mheshimiwa is saying, is very, very important. And that is that is part of the style of politics. You bring people, you create the impression that it's inclusive. But in the Kenyan context, the inclusivity is not about bringing the face of Kenya. It is the face of Kenya from where? Let's take, for example, the Minister of Defense. You have the CS there, who is from Nyanza. Nobody believes that lady represents Nyanza or has anything to do with Nyanza or anything. So she's not part of the face of Kenya. This is the perception. But if you went to Nyanza and picked somebody from who is sound record, then you hear people saying, oh, now you are bringing the nation, you are bringing unity, inclusivity, and so on. So there is the whole question, the old question of political patronage, that you want to bring the IPPG, the power sharing, in political party formation. And that to me, and I
was talking about setting up an electoral commission.
No. We have no problem with the electoral constitution.
That's what I was talking
because
about.
Our constitution was very clear. Wanjiru and others were here. I was the executive director in support of this constitution. You know, and I was part of the people who formed this. And part of the concern that we had around that time, guided by what Kriegler had said, was to have an electoral commission that is beyond reproach, like Caesar's wife. That's what you you don't think that the people.
Is that what is the situation
we
now?
have the constitution. You go to court if you find that there's something that is not working. The IEBC is not established by the president. It is not established by the opposition. It is established by parliament. I think that is the point. Now there is this idea of mixing institutions and individuals. Maybe you want a Njoroge there, or you want a Mutiso there, therefore IEBC is not good. Look at the law of the Republic of Kenya and what it says about IEBC, then look at the individual serving in IEBC and tell us what has he done wrong as an individual. Get him in terms of his capacity to serve. Look at chapter 6 of the Constitution and say in terms of their their fitness to be in that office, that they don't fit to be there.
Exactly.
Otherwise, you start witch hunting from Chicken Gate to whatever, and the idea is to get her.
Okay, fine.
Unfortunately, Kagwanja is very good at mixing issues. And let's be very clear, inclusivity is not about, yes, we can acknowledge the president has appointed people that represent the face of Kenya. Yes. So why are we still not feeling that representation? Because of this aspect called coercive power, because of a lack of respect for rule of law. So you have people in offices, like you have the IBC commissioners, you have the EACC is the best example. You have people in office who are then so subject to the executive power of the president that they don't execute their constitutional mandate. Actually, the crisis we have in Kenya is that the people who are given constitutional positions, state offices, are not objective, do not uphold the constitution, and what we are saying is that the president has actually abetted this undermining of the constitution rather than standing and ensuring that the standard on which people are elected, people continue to enjoy office, is upholding the constitution. So that is where the issue of inclusivity, the issue of unity and cohesion comes in. The standard that is used to measure the performance of state officers is subject to the extent to which they take forward or support the interests of the party as opposed to the interests of the country. NYS is one of the good examples. If you look at what happened around NYS, it's very disturbing. You had one ministry given a lot of money with a mandate which is aligned to the manifesto of the Jubilee administration, youth employment. First of all, the NYS is unconstitutional because it was a national government implementing county functions. But that aside, The way it was structured then was very unaccountable. So again, another constitutional breach, because you're not supposed to put money in a place where it's so easily accessed by the administrators. That is basic good governance. Those principles were not adhered to. When issues came to bear, the whistle was blown by the opposition leader, and he was vilified as bringing down the government. That is where you begin to fuel a lot of dissent. And then the issue unravels, and of course it became evident a lot of money was stolen and a lot of state officers were complicit. Yet the CID, the EACC were investigating this process and found it and gave it a clean bill of health. The moment that happens, confidence in the administration and its institutions is undermined, because then as a citizen I know I cannot get justice from the institutions of the state. I would rather use my own means, and that's why I will be very easily driven towards conflict and violence. So that is what we are trying to tell Professor Kagwanja about. Coercive, unaccountable power exercised by the head of state is undermining the constitution. It's not about putting a Luya there. It's about when that person gets there, do they uphold the constitution? And if they don't, does the president crack the whip? Unfortunately, the answer is
just a quick, before I even answer that, when Jiro is talking about we are trying to tell Professor Kagwanja, did you come here as a gang? So let's be clear about that. No, you did not come here as a gang.
As an intellectual. Wait a minute.
I'm being generous here.
Professor here knows about the English notion of we. And when she says we, she does not necessarily mean
I love your diplomacy.
He is an intellectual.
I just love you.
Put it down, stick to the issue.
Let's ask the question. The point is that when I came here, I did not expect that I'm going to hear praises and praises about Jubilee government, because next year is an election process. But Jiro is committed. Professor, I mean, my fellow intellectual is committed. Mheshimiwa is committed.
I'm committed to the country.
We must remember the discussion about the address by the president.
That is the point.
This afternoon.
So
not about next year's election.
The president, like the father of the nation, because that's what the institution is all about, will have to be responsible. He cannot come home and say the state of the nation is not correct, because you have to give hope to the country and scan the future and give direction and the words of hope. So today we expect messages of hope. We don't expect messages of tribulation and lamentations, the Jeremiahs and all those kind of things. We expect messages of hope. What we are getting from here are messages of tribulation and I think the president is also listening. as he formulates his agenda right now, he's listening, so that this Jeremiah doesn't matter. You see, this Jeremiah doesn't matter. So that the president takes them into account, so that when he reads the next state of the nation in March, that these Jeremiahs and lamentations will be taken into account. That we need an inclusive state. Who doesn't know that? We need an inclusive nation. In our appointments, we need to have the face of Kenya. In terms of corruption, we need to get rid of corruption. All those things will be in the state of the nation. Only that they will be coached in a manner that they give hope to this nation. They don't echo David D's frustrations, almost getting to nihilism, that the nation must be quartered to the east and the west by all the horses, so that it is split or broken like a grass plate. So the point is this: the president will be responsible. He will also do his duty of inspiring the nation. That is his ultimate duty, and he will use. He will not be playing PR. He will not be playing PR.
One interjection, Motegi, there is a difference between hope and platitudes, and that's the point I was making. I expect we will receive a lot of platitudes, because the president cannot stand up there and say what has not worked. We don't expect that. That's why I was saying it's a PR exercise. The reality still remains. There's a distinction between hope and platitudes, and on that we agree.
The best leaders we have had in the world, from Martin Luther, to Abraham Lincoln, to Alexander the Great, all these leaders have one quality in common, that they get their countries at the worst time. Churchill got his country when there was blood all over, bombs raining. his main singular role as a leader was to inspire the nation at its worst moment. Nobody says that Kenya is not facing challenges. Nobody says, the state of the nation is, first of all, to account for what we have done, what we have not done, and where we are headed. But within that, you coach it with a message of hope, so that our children and grandchildren have faith in this country and they don't speak like David D.
Okay, in your view, do you think at the end of the day, Wanjiku will have hope?
There must be hope, and I agree with the professor here that the president must give a message of hope. But this message of hope, among other things, must be very truthful. It's not just about garnishment, or as Wanjiru calls it, window dressing, public relations. You see, the last time we had very good things and we were very inspired, but in reality it was just steam and hot air. Nothing did come out of it. The message of hope, yes, we need. It's also true that difficult times give leaders the opportunity to rise to greatness. And you rise to greatness by rallying the whole nation together in something that they can believe in, and you yourself start doing the right things. If the president is going to talk about corruption, while corruption sits at the heart of government, where he can even say, get rid of these people. If he's going to talk about constitutionalism, and you look at his cabinet, and that cabinet does not even respect the gender requirements, and this is not something about which professor here can tell us that his hands are tied, then his words become just that, an insignificant formation of good sounding words.
Finally, final word before you conclude.
You know, the big issue here is
brief.
Yeah, I'm going to be very brief. Is that will Kenyan trust what is on to
Yes, that's what I'm asking.
That's the big issue. To me, not, because from the past, last time he did it, people were happy. They trusted what he said. What's the result? It's negative. So as much as you know, you can inspire people when you remain true to your cause. When you pursue the cause and people can see it, that actually you are true to your cause to help the nation. And in this situation where we are, that is lacking. The commitment is lacking. And as I said, my first word I said is just doing it because it's a constitutional requirement. If we had an option, perhaps keep it. And I can remember in Parliament we should have been in recess. But because it's a constitutional requirement, we were told, hold on, man, please. We are not closing. We want to be in. We are in session because of that. So overall, the Kenyans are there to judge us, to judge what the president would say. But to me, will it inspire people? Will it bring hope? The answer is no. Thank you.
Before we conclude, your final word.
You know, I agree with that. I think I'll be looking out to see if the president speaks to the election issue substantively and properly diagnoses the challenges, because it's
the forthcoming election.
Yeah, the forthcoming election. Yes. The issue around the IEBC, the transitions that are impending, the performance of the IEBC, execution of its mandate, restoring its credibility, which is at an all-time low, and also the judicial transitions that are impending. Because we can, you know, window dressing and hope are a necessary part of it, but we have to look out for the substantive issues that will drive the Jubilee agenda.
Finally.
Yeah, I think the state of the nation in Kenya is great. Our national project is still work in progress, and we're working very hard to see it that our great-grandchildren will enjoy it. It's in great shape. Kenya is already a key player in the international arena. From April 1st, we'll be heading the Africa Peace and Security Council of the African Union, working with the UN in order to build peace in this continent. I can assure Wanjiru the election next year will be terribly peaceful, because no Kenyan in their right senses want to get us to where we were in 2008, 2007, 2008. It will be peaceful. The constitution will be followed to the letter to ensure that IEBC is as beyond suspicion as Caesar's wife, and therefore the state of this nation is great. And I think that's the message we get this afternoon.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Wananchi will judge who is talking the truth.